Dhanyavad Pranam. Namaste. By the grace and instruction of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are reading Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 1, Chapter 13, Text 5. Pratyujagmu praharshena pranam tanva ivagatam abhishangam yavidhivat parisvangabhi vadanai. With great delight they all approached him as if life had returned to their bodies. They exchanged obeisances and welcomed each other with embraces. In the absence of consciousness, the limbs of the body remain inactive, but when consciousness returns, the limbs and senses become active, and existence itself becomes delightful. Vidura was so dear to the members of the core of a family that his long absence from the palace was comparable to inactivity. All of them were feeling acute separation from Vidura, and therefore his return to the palace was joyful for all. Text 6. Mumhuchu prema bhashpagam virahaut kantaya katar rajatam arhayam chakre kritashhana parigraham. Due to anxieties and long separation, they all cried out of affection. King Yudhisthira then arranged to offer sitting accommodations and a reception. Text 7. Tam bhukta vantam vishrantam ashinam shukam ashane prashraya vanato raja prahatesham cha shrinvatam. After Vidura ate sumptuously and took sufficient rest, he was comfortably seated. Then the king began to speak to him, and all who were present there listened. Purport. King Yudhisthira was an expert in reception also, even in the case of his family members. Vidura was well received by all the family members by exchange of embraces and obeisances. After that, bathing and arrangements for a sumptuous dinner were made, and then he was given sufficient rest. After finishing his rest, he was offered a comfortable place to sit, and then the king began to talk about all happenings, both family and otherwise. That is the proper way to receive a beloved friend, or even an enemy. According to Indian moral codes, even an enemy received at home should be so well received that he will not feel any fearful situation. An enemy is always afraid of his enemy, but this should not be so when he is received at home by his enemy. This means that a person, when received at home, should be treated as a relative. So what to speak of a family member like Vidura, who was a well-wisher for all the members of the family. Thus Yudhisthira Maharaj began to speak in the presence of all other members. Text 8. Yudhisthira uvacha api samartha no yusmat paksha chaya sameditan vipadgranad vishagnaidar mochitayat samakraha. Maharaj Yudhisthira said, My uncle, do you remember how you always protected us, along with our mother, from all sorts of calamities? Your partiality, like the wings of a bird, saved us from poisoning and arson. Purport. Due to Pandu's death at an early age, his minor children and widow were the object of special care by all the elderly members of the family, especially Bhismadev and Mahatma Vidura. Vidura was more or less partial to the Pandavas due to their political position. Although Dhṛtarāṣṭra was equally careful for the minor children of Maharaj Pandu, he was one of the intriguing parties who wanted to wash away the descendants of Pandu and replace them by raising his own sons to become the rulers of the kingdom. Mahatma Vidura could follow his intrigue of Dhṛtarāṣṭra and company, and therefore, even though he was a faithful servitor of his eldest brother, Dhṛtarāṣṭra, he did not like his political ambition for the sake of his own sons. He was therefore very careful about the protection of the Pandavas and their widow mother. Thus he was, so to speak, partial to the Pandavas, preferring them to the sons of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, although both of them were equally affectionate in his ordinary eyes. He was equally affectionate to both the camps of nephews in the sense that he always chastised Duryodhana for his intriguing policy against his cousins. He always chastised his elder brother for his policy of encouragement to his sons, and at the same time he always was alert in giving special protection to the Pandavas. All these different activities of Vidura within the palace politics made him well known as partial to the Pandavas. Maharaj Yudhisthira has referred to the past history of Vidura before his going away from home for a prolonged pilgrim's journey. Maharaj Yudhisthira reminded him that he was equally kind and partial to his grown-up nephews, even after the Battle of Kurukshetra, a great family disaster. Before the Battle of Kurukshetra, Dhṛtarāṣṭra's family was annihilated. Before the Battle of Kurukshetra, Dhṛtarāṣṭra's policy was peaceful annihilation of his nephews, and therefore he ordered Purāna to build a house of Lak at Bhāgavata. And when the building was finished, Dhṛtarāṣṭra desired that his brother's family live there for some time. When the Pandavas were going there in the presence of all members of the royal family, Vidura tactfully gave instructions to the Pandavas about the future plan of Dhṛtarāṣṭra. This was specifically described in Mahabharata, Adiparva 144. He indirectly hinted, even a weapon not made of steel or any other material element can be more than sharp enough to kill an enemy, and he who knows this is never killed. That is to say, he hinted that the party of the Pandavas was being sent to Varnavata to be killed, and thus he warned Yudhisthira to be very careful in their new residential palace. He also gave indications of fire and said that fire cannot extinguish the soul, but can annihilate the material body. But one who protects the soul can live. Kunti could not follow such indirect conversations between Maharaj Yudhisthira and Vidura, and thus when she inquired from her son about the purport of the conversation, Yudhisthira replied that from talks with Vidura it was understood that there was a hint of fire in the house where they were proceeding. Later on, Vidura came in disguise to the Pandavas and informed them that the housekeeper was going to set fire to the house on the 14th night of the waning moon. It was an intrigue of Dhṛtarāṣṭra that the Pandavas might die altogether with their mother, and by this warning the Pandavas escaped through a tunnel underneath the earth, so that their escape was also unknown to Dhṛtarāṣṭra. So much so that after setting the fire, the Kauravas were so certain of the death of the Pandavas that Dhṛtarāṣṭra performed the last rites of death with great cheerfulness. And during the mourning period all the members of the palace became overwhelmed with lamentation, but Vidura did not become so, because of his knowledge that the Pandavas were alive somewhere. There are many such instances of calamities, and in each of them Vidura gave protection to the Pandavas on one hand, and on the other hand he tried to restrain his brother Dhṛtarāṣṭra from such intriguing policies. Therefore he was always partial to the Pandavas, just as a bird protects its eggs by its wing. Text 9. Kayavritya vartitavas Tarabdi Kriti Mandalam Tirtani Kshetra Mukhyani Sevitani Habutale. While traveling on the surface of the earth, how did you maintain your livelihood? At which holy places and pilgrimage sites did you render service? Vidura, this is the purport now. Vidura went out from the palace to detach himself from household affairs, especially political intrigues. As referred to herein before, he was practically insulted by Duryodhana's calling him a son of Sudrani, although it was not out of place to talk loosely in the case of one's grandmother. Vidura's mother, although a Sudrani, was the grandmother of Duryodhana, and funny talks are sometimes allowed between grandmother and grandchildren. But because the remark was an actual fact, it was unpalatable talk to Vidura, and it was accepted as a direct insult. He therefore decided to quit his paternal house and prepare for the renounced order of life. This preparatory stage is called Vanaprastha Ashram, or retired life for traveling and visiting the holy places on the surface of the earth. In the holy places of India, like Vrindavan, Hardwar, Jagannath Puri, and Prayag, there are many great devotees, and there are still free kitchen houses for persons who desire to advance spiritually. Maharaj Yudhisthira was inquisitive to learn whether Vidura maintained himself by the mercy of the free kitchen houses, chatras. Text 10. Bhavadvidha Bhagavatas Tirtha Bhutas Svayam Vibho Tirthi Korvanti Tirthani Svantastena Gadhabrata. My Lord, devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified. Because you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart, you turn all places into pilgrimage places. Purport. The personality of Godhead is omnipresent, by his diverse potencies everywhere, just as the power of electricity is distributed everywhere within space. Similarly, the Lord's omnipresence is perceived and manifested by his unalloyed devotees like Vidura, just as electricity is manifested in an electric bulb. A pure devotee like Vidura always feels the presence of the Lord everywhere. He sees everything in the potency of the Lord, and the Lord in everything. The holy places all over the earth are meant for purifying the polluted consciousness of the human being by an atmosphere surcharged with the presence of the Lord's unalloyed devotees. If anyone visits a holy place, he must search out the pure devotees residing in such holy places, take lessons from them, try to apply such instructions in practical life, and thus gradually prepare oneself for the ultimate salvation, going back to Godhead. To go to some holy place of pilgrimage does not mean only to take a bath in the Ganges or Yamuna, or to visit the temples situated in those places. One should also find representatives of Vidura who have no desire in life save and except to serve the personality of Godhead. The personality of Godhead is always with such pure devotees, because of their unalloyed service, which is without any tinge or fruit of action or utopian speculation. They are in the actual service of the Lord, specifically by the process of hearing and chanting. The pure devotees hear from the authorities and chant, sing, and write of the glories of the Lord. Mahamuni Vyasadeva heard from Narada, and then he chanted in writing. Shukadeva Goswami studied from his father, and he described it to Parikshit. That is the way of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So by their actions the pure devotees of the Lord can render any place into a place of pilgrimage, and the holy places are worth the name only on their account. Such pure devotees are able to rectify the polluted atmosphere of any place, and what to speak of a holy place rendered unholy by the questionable actions of interested persons, who try to adopt a professional life at the cost of the reputation of a holy place. Text 11. Apina surhridhastata bandhava Krishna devata Dhṛtarāṣṭra yadhava swapuryam shukam ashate. My uncle, you must have visited Dwarka. In that holy place are our friends and well-wishers, the descendants of Yadu, who are always wrapped in the service of the Lord of Sri Krishna, are always wrapped in the service of the Lord Sri Krishna. You might have seen them or heard about them. Are they all living happily in their abodes? Purport. The particular word Krishna Devata, i.e., those who are always wrapped in the service of Lord Krishna, is significant. The Yadavas and the Pandavas, who were always wrapped in the thought of Lord Krishna and his different transcendental activities, were all pure devotees of the Lord, like Vidura. Vidura left home in order to devote himself completely to the service of the Lord, but the Pandavas and the Yadavas were always wrapped in the thought of Lord Krishna. Thus there is no difference in their pure devotional qualities. Either remaining at home or leaving home, the real qualification of a pure devotee is to become wrapped in the thought of Krishna favorably, i.e., knowing well that Lord Krishna is the absolute personality of Godhead. Kamsa, Jarasandha, Shishupal, and other demons like them were always wrapped in the thought of Krishna, but they were absorbed in a different way, namely unfavorably, or thinking him to be a powerful man only. Therefore, Kamsa and Shishupal are not on the same level as pure devotees like Vidura, the Pandavas, and the Yadavas. Maharaj Yudhisthira was also always wrapped in the thought of Lord Krishna and his associates at Dwarka. Otherwise he could not have asked them all about them from Vidura. Maharaj Yudhisthira was therefore on the same level of devotion as Vidura, although engaged in the state affairs of the kingdom of the world. Thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 12 on Monday. All glories to Srila Bhakti Nishkam Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Bhakti Vigyan Muni Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Bhakti Nirmala Charya Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to our Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees Ki Jai. All glories to the worldwide devotees Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Nishingapoli Dham Ki Jai, Ekachakra Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham ki jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi ki jai, Nitai Gora Hari 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 Bol. Dhanyavad Pranam.